Hey folks, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started here in approximately 3 minutes. We're really stoked to bring you this program. See you in 3 minutes. Hey folks, welcome to Heartifacts. Let's get this show rolling. Sarah, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Heartifacts. We're really glad you're here and you can join us while we have intimate discussions about mental health, community building, and all other important things that software professionals need to talk about more. My name is Sarah Withy, and I'm your MC for the event. This is the second iteration of Heartifacts, the first being a 2-day in-person event in April 2018. Jenny Manning came up with the central idea of a conference focused on mental health, specifically focused on software professionals sharing their experiences and advice. We added community building and it was popular. It sold out. Like that 2018 conference, attendance to the interactive portions of this iteration of Heartifacts is limited in order to encourage intimate, meaningful discussions, and to build friendships through a shared experience. When posting about Heartifacts on social media, we encourage you to use our hashtag Heartifacts and to mention @HeartifactsConf when posting on Twitter. Please stay muted when you're on the main track. We have administratively muted everyone, and you shouldn't be able to unmute, but just in case, please don't. While Zoom chat may be turned on, we want to leave that for technical issues only. So if you have questions for our speakers or for one of the organizers, please use that in the Heartifacts live channel, or you can always ask in the Heartifacts tech support if you need something. We encourage you to keep your camera on in the main track in order to see and be seen, but we'll leave it up to you whether you're comfortable with that. And finally, for these announcements, please do not share the Zoom links with anyone. Those who have them are able to get to them quickly and easily through our authenticated system at codeandsupply.co/my_tickets. Sharing a Zoom link will get you booted. Before we proceed to our first talk, I'd like to introduce Colin Dean, the Acting Director of Code and Supply and the Executive Director of Heartifacts, for some words about Code and Supply.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Hello, how is everybody? You may recognize me. I've got my scarf on. Oftentimes you'll see me at Heartifacts events or Code and Supply events with a hat on. I would love to wear it, but unfortunately with this headset on, I can't wear it. So anyway, hello, humans of Heartifacts. As a test of Zoom's reaction feature on the lower bar of your Zoom window, and as a throwback to a common phrase during the 2018 in-person event, clap once if you can hear me. Cool, I saw a couple of people do it. Great, thank you very much. So thank you very much for spending a significant part of the next few days with us. Heartifacts 2020 is Code and Supply's first online conference and among its first 10 online events. Bear with us as we inevitably hit some bumps along the way. We're bound to make some mistakes, but we promise you we'll recover from them relatively quickly. I'm really proud of my team of 11 volunteers, including myself, who have pulled together to make this event happen over the last several months, holding meetings and several live broadcast rehearsals during a year that is destined to be a very thick chapter in the history of humanity. Heartifacts is organized by this all-volunteer team under the auspices of Code and Supply, a small 7-year-old, sometimes we make a profit company based in Pittsburgh and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in the United States. Code and Supply is Pittsburgh's premier community of software professionals and builds that community through educational meetups, conferences, online communities, and its co-working space near the border of East Liberty and Friendship in Pittsburgh, or in Pittsburgh's East End. Those of you who are participating in Heartifacts interactive sessions received or will soon receive some handouts along with your sticker sheet and a webcam privacy cover. That's what that little plastic black slidey thing is. Some of you didn't know what that was. You're probably also logged into the attendee portal because that's where you got the link if you were watching this on Zoom instead of on Twitch or YouTube. And you've probably already gotten access to the Heartifacts live channel on the Code and Supply Slack. In the meantime, you can check out codeandsupply.co to learn more about Code and Supply's activities, past, present, and future. And please do explore our YouTube and our social media in order to see some of the great content that we publish for free. One of the things in which Code and Supply prides itself is our widely praised conduct policy. We have a very short video about that, which I will show you now.
Before we start, I want to talk about the Code and Supply conduct policy. Code and Supply is dedicated to providing spaces for meaningful experiences for everyone and expects participants at all of its events and communities, online and in person, to act in a way that promotes an environment that is harassment-free, safe, comfortable, and enjoyable. We do not tolerate harassment of participants in any form.
Our events are for everyone, no matter which recognized group you belong. While participating in this Code and Supply event, we hope you will behave in a way that creates a supportive and professional environment. To reread the Code and Supply conduct policy in full, including the recognized groups and prohibited actions, please visit www.codeandsupply.co/policies/conduct. If you spot conduct not in line with our policy, please let an organizer know. In Slack, mark a post with the conduct_warning emoji so that our conduct team can investigate. If the action continues or is occurring in private messaging, go into the conduct violations channel and privately message any team member listed in the channel topic. Other contact methods are listed in the conduct policy.
If you have any questions, please talk to an event organizer. Anyone who is subject to conduct team action is expected to follow that team's instructions or they will be removed from the space. Again, to reread the Code and Supply conduct policy in full, please visit www.codeandsupply.co/policies/conduct. Thank you for your contribution to making this Code and Supply space welcoming for everyone.
Hello, I'm Anjuan Simmons.
And I'm
Thank you once again for your attention to our conduct policy, and thank you again for spending some time with us this weekend. You'll be hearing more from me throughout the conference, mostly as kind of a promotional person for Code and Supply. Sarah?
Thank you, Colin. We also want to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors. While an in-person event can cost many tens of thousands of dollars and virtual events cost considerably less, there's still a lot of expenses that go into an event like this. Their support helps make it possible, keeps your tickets affordable, and helps us to pay our speakers. So we want to thank our sponsors. I'm not seeing them. Colin, you want to cut over to the slide?
Oh, there they are.
There we go. Yes.
There we go.
Thank all of you sponsors, TrueFit, Elastic, Code and Coffee. I don't know what RP is. Start Now.
Rust Belt and Start Now, and Carnegie Mellon University Institute for Software Research, ANSYS, and Redshift.
Yes, all of them. Thank you very much. If you are watching at the moment, maybe you can screenshot this slide and thank them on Twitter or other social media. All right. In case you haven't heard, 2020 has been a bit of a rough year with the pandemic, among what feels like a million other things. You're probably a bit burnt out, which is why our first talk of the conference is a great way to start Heartifacts off. Our first presenters are Anjuan Simmons and Dr. Aneika Simmons. Anjuan is a technologist with a successful track record of delivering technology solutions from the user interface to the database. He combines his experiences working at Big Four management consulting companies, as well as small technology startups to implement practical solutions that can be understood and scaled across organizations. He's an energetic and informative speaker who presents at conferences, seminars, schools, and community centers around the world on topics including agile software development, inclusion, and leadership. Anjuan has an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and an MBA from Texas A&M University. Aneika teaches courses about leadership, organization behavior, and human resources at Sam Houston State University. She completed her doctorate degree in organizational behavior and human resources at Texas A&M University. Prior to pursuing her PhD, Dr. Simmons worked for Accenture and Capgemini Ernst & Young as an information technology consultant. She also has her master's degree in organizational communication from the University of Houston. The two of them will be sharing about how you can manage the burnout burndown. So here they are, Dr. Aneika Simmons and Anjuan Simmons.
Anjuan Simmons.
And I'm Dr. Aneika Simmons.
And this is our talk on managing the burnout burndown. So let's get right to it. So if you're like me, then you work in software and you are just a real fan of the fact that we can turn any idea into working software, that anything that we think of, that we think our users want, can become code. And the excitement around this has been something that the media often reports on, the idea that these amazing companies that most of us use some of their software to figure out our daily lives, started in garages as just ideas. And so there's a lot of press about how software is cool. In fact, this exuberance has even come from the levels of companies that most of us have heard of to even our day-to-day lives. And the idea that anyone can take a really easy to use language and then create something everyone carries around in their pockets to use every day. But there is a dark side to building software that is not as well covered in the media, and that's the fact that building software can be exhausting. And some of this exhaustion is due to the fact that software is an industry that's always changing. There are some new language or framework or technology that we need to use to do our daily work. And for a lot of people, this is really surprising because software is not like construction. And Most of you watching this, you're in a building that has a floor and it has walls and a ceiling, and people actually did labor to lay that floor and hang the drywall on those walls and put up the light fixtures. And so we think about that as labor, and we don't think of building software as labor because often we're sitting at our desk and we may have some nice well-crafted coffee next to us, and we are usually sitting in nice plush chairs. But building software is labor. It is work that it does extract a cost to the people who work in software development. And it's this dark side of software development that we often don't talk about. And the fact is that building software does put a mental and psychological burden on the people who write software. And those are the engineers, the testers, the project managers, everyone involved feels this burden. And so we don't really have a lot of language around this burden. And so we really wrote this talk to be able to help people who have worked in software development understand ways to cope. Another part of why software can be such a burden is the idea of always be shipping. And this is something that many of you have heard about, and maybe your manager or your manager who has used this term. And this is the idea that if we're always shipping features to users, then we are always justifying the reason that our team exists. But the reality is that any system that is always on will fail. And you have to take time to take the system offline and maintenance it, give it a chance to rest, give it a chance to be restored. And I am before you right now, and we both experience a degree of stress, and that stress, if left unmanaged, will lead to burnout. And burnout people burn out. They burn down valuable things, but they also go outside of structures that we set up for the team and for the company. And maybe you've seen people burn down code by introducing bugs when they usually have not done that, or they start to become argumentative and they sometimes burn down relationships with the people who are on the team. And then they go out of communication tools like Slack or the documentation that the team is using to track what we do. And you begin to see their contributions begin to slow down and trickle down over time. And so we really need to take stress and managing seriously. And a big reason why we wrote this talk is to do just that, to present a really easy to use framework. Because if you don't handle stress, then your team will begin to be handled by it. And you'll see always be shipping, turn to always be slipping as your team slips deadline after deadline as they labor under the weight of being burned out. Now, this is something that I'm happy to have my wife here with me because she's going to go over some of the academic research behind burnout.
Thank you, Anjuan. Yeah, so really we have an issue here, and it's called the burnout problem. Now, being married to someone who's built enterprise software for more than 2 decades, and myself, I used to work for Accenture and Capgemini and Ernst & Young as an information technologist. I've also seen firsthand the experience of stress in this industry, but also as an academic, I see it as well. So as a business professor, I've studied the research that proves burnout isn't something that only happens to my family. It's an issue that is common to man. So before we go further, let's define burnout. We've looked at a number of academic and contemporary resources to get a working definition of burnout. And here's what we've come up with. As stated in the June 2016 issue of World Psychiatry, burnout is a psychological syndrome emerging as a prolonged response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. Now, stressors are what cause stress. Stress is what I feel. The 3 key dimensions of this response are: number 1, an overwhelming feeling of exhaustion; number 2, a feeling of cynicism and detachment from the job; and 3rd, a sense of ineffectiveness and a lack of accomplishment. So to put it simply, burnout is the ongoing feeling that today's resources aren't enough to meet tomorrow's demands. We're here today to focus on how burnout affects those who are part of software development teams, but it's a problem that spans multiple industries. The 3 dimensions of burnout. Let's kind of dig deeper. Emotional exhaustion. Well, this is an overall lack of energy and a sense that your emotional resources are being fully consumed by work. That means that when you come home, you feel like you have nothing left to give to the things or the people that you love. Depersonalization is the second one. This signifies an unfeeling, cynical, or even impersonal response toward the recipients of one's service. This is like when you go to the hospital to check on a friend and the nurse says there's a broken arm in room 2. That nurse has stopped seeing patients as people and just sees them as a problem to fix. And I've experienced that myself while I was addressed as just a problem, like, oh, you know, the stomach ailment, they're in room 3. I had to get my stuff and go. So you got to be careful with that. And number 3, reduce personal accomplishment. This is marked by a tendency to evaluate oneself negatively, particularly with regard to work with clients. You begin to be overly critical of your work, which leads to self-criticism, which is no good. Now, widespread burnout. How widespread is it? Well, a Gallup workplace poll did a 3-part series last year on employees' burnout. It showed that burnout is a very common problem. In fact, 23% of 7,500 respondents reported feeling burned out at work very often or always, while 44% said they felt burned out sometimes. That means almost 2/3 of full-time workers experience some degree of burnout. You may be thinking, well, my team is highly engaged. How could they be burned out? Surely they can't be. We have hackathons, video consoles in the office. We keep the bar stocked with beer when we were all at work, of course, and people love hanging out at the office. While engagement is often seen as the opposite of burnout, the University of Cambridge published an article in February 2018 that showed even highly engaged employees are subject to burnout. The article cited a study published in 2018 by the Career Development International Journal, which states, interestingly, many employees appear to be optimally engaged while they are burned out and considering leaving the company. The article observed the highest turnover intentions were reported by the highly engaged, exhausted group, higher than even the unengaged group that might be commonly expected to be eyeing an exit. So I can be highly engaged and exhausted and want a way out. Well, why is this? Well, there's an individual cost to burnout. Ignoring burnout can present significant consequences to individuals. When we first gave this talk in April 2019, I can't believe it's been over a year, babe, in New York City, there was no medical diagnosis for burnout. However, in late May of 2019, the World Health Organization reclassified burnout as a legitimate diagnosis. The Mayo Clinic has a list of symptoms, which include, number 1, physical illness like fatigue and high blood pressure. We don't want that. Psychological distress, including sadness, irritability, anger, and rage. I like our little symbols for that, even though these are not good things. And of course, lastly, increased sick days and visits to emergency room. These symptoms add up and have real-world ramifications in addition to their impact on our work and our personal lives. Harvard Business School found in 2015 that workplace stress contributes up to 8% of the national spending on healthcare. If you don't happen to know how much national spending on healthcare was in 2015, it's about $190 billion. The biggest factor in these costs, high demands at work, which accounted for about $48 billion in spending. Furthermore, approximately 120,000 people die each year of stress at work. That's horrible. We do not want that. Now we want to make it clear that stress and burnout are not the same thing. Stress is one of the factors that can lead to burnout. However, it's clear that stress and those who succumb to burnout results in costs that directly impact the bottom line of companies. Given the cost of stress and burnout, it's not surprising that it's a problem that a lot of people try to solve. Anjuan will go over some of those common solutions next.
Wow, when you think about the cost of burnout, right? Billions of dollars and so many people who have died because of burnout, you almost wonder, is this talk about burnout or about Thanos? Well, the fact is that because burnout is such a common problem, many people, both as a set of corporations and as individuals, have tried to solve the problem. And we found in our research that these problems are fairly common, but they often come up short. So we're going to talk about both in the next few slides. So let's talk about how corporations try to solve burnout. I've been very privileged as someone who has worked in technology for over 20 years to have gone to a lot of software development companies. I've been to GitHub in San Francisco. I've been to Mailchimp in Atlanta. I've been to Prezi in Budapest. And you go into these offices and they're in these magnificently designed buildings of steel and stone and glass. And there's often these beautiful break rooms and there's foosball tables, and you can play table tennis and all these amenities that are there to help the people who work there feel like royalty. But sometimes royalty winds up at the red wedding. And no matter how plush your office is, when your team gets to that point, there's really not a lot that you can do to get them out of the damage of stress, unless you're very intentional about it. And the reality is that these amenities and these techniques are often there when times are good. But when we hit a recession or some downturn in the economy, often these things are the first things that get cut. And so we wanted to create a framework that was beyond what corporations would do. It had to be effective, but it had to be a way that people without privilege could access and take hold of these techniques. And so we want to do something more than what we've seen corporations do. So Aneika is going to talk about how individuals try to mitigate stress and avoid burnout.
Love this picture, of course, boots on the beach, I don't know, but given the often precarious availability of help from their companies, individuals often try to come up with their own solutions to burnout. However, people are often bad at effectively dealing with stress, meaning they actually don't solve the problem. We often go to excess by abusing food, drugs, alcohol, or we turn to escapism by doing things like taking exciting, extravagant trips. Well, those aren't bad things, but how many of us actually love to practice self-care by taking a vacation? But with our current social media environment, even self-care becomes a performance. People are often, unfortunately, falling off the Grand Canyon trying to get the perfect selfie for Instagram and Snapchat. And that really defeats the point. We're trying to build and reinvigorate ourselves. But we work to show people how much we're not working. Also, escapism usually requires access to wealth that isn't available to everyone in tech or in academia. So some people have the funds to go on these trips, or maybe others do not. So corporate efforts are often undermined by concerns about the success of the business, and individuals' efforts often lack efficacy and accessibility. So the solution to burnout has to involve simple and effective practices for managing stress. As we look for a model for addressing burnout in tech and other industries, we wanted a framework that would be effective yet not require privilege to access. We found a 3-part plan that we've seen in our own lives, as well as the lives of software engineers. We want this plan to be accessible, so they are geared around practices that individuals can immediately implement with very little cost. However, for each part of the model, we also have a point or two for what companies can do given the budget, and if they have the willingness to tackle burnout. It can't be ignored. We have a lot to share about this framework, but we want to make sure we specify clear calls to action. So in each part, we'll share something we call the one thing you simply must do that we think are best ways to start burning down burnout. Before we go into our model, Anjuan will give you some inspiration behind it.
Right. So I'm sure that many of you watching this have used a burnout chart, but just to make sure we're all using the same terminology, I'm going to quickly describe what a burn-down chart is. Now, I'm an engineering manager, and I've also done work as a Scrum Master, and so it really comes from the world of agile software development. So the way a burn-down chart works is that you have the horizontal axis, which is time, you have the vertical axis, which is work. And so the idea is that over a period of time, this ideal line will guide the team, showing what would happen if the team perfectly burned down the work evenly over the 10-day period as shown in this example. And so we have the work, and then we see that as we do the work, we'll burn it down, and that the work left to be done will hopefully become less as we go throughout the time period that we're trying to specify in this 10-day cycle, usually referred to as a sprint. And so this work becomes what we're trying to burn down. We're trying to burn down the work so that by the time we're over, by the time the sprint is over, then it's down to 0. Now, I've used a lot of burn down charts with many teams across multiple companies. I'm sure that many of you have seen this. Some of you may go through it every day during your daily stand-up. But as I worked with burn down charts and often work late at night looking at them, I realized that as an engineering manager who cares about my team, but also as a person, I had to do more than burn down work. I realized that there are certain things I needed to burn down to deal with the stress that my team was under. And that was really the model and really the thing that was the inspiration for this talk that we needed to burn down certain things, just like we burn down work. And that's really how we came up with this talk. And so a lot of what we try to do in this talk is be very action-oriented to make sure that everyone can have things that they can take even right after this talk is done and begin implementing into your daily life.
Burning down barriers. I love this picture. Eye contact is so powerful. It's so meaningful. As human beings, we want to make sure that we have people, we look them in the eye. I know it's difficult with all these Zoom meetings, but just that human connection is really important. So we all need a network of people who will walk through our lives with us. Human beings are actually built for relationships. That's why when, unfortunately, if someone goes to prison, one of the worst things that they can do to you is put you in isolations. We need other people. So it becomes cliche, but if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, well, let's go together. In our research into burnout, we've seen human relationships cited as a key way to protect against burnout. As members of software development teams, it's vital to burn down barriers between you and the people you work with. You should also foster an environment of open discussion where every team member feels empowered to share their ideas. Even if you're not the manager, you should also recognize good work, ideally immediately after it occurs. However, make sure you know how each team member likes to be recognized. Some people may want it done privately, while others don't mind public praise. Also, some prefer written recognition, while others want it to be said verbally. There are low-cost ways to strengthen your relationships with your teams, but companies can also help. They can incentivize socializing around shared interests, or companies can give out gift cards that can only be used if 2 or 3 or more people take part in the purchase or the activity. So the one thing you simply must do is have regular meetings with people in person. This can be anywhere, like in a coffee shop, a restaurant, a park, but it should be at least once a month. And with COVID-19, then of course, perhaps a park is a good idea because you can easily kind of space out and everybody bring their own food. That would be nice. Pick the one thing that is causing you the most stress in your life and share with the people in that group. While they may not be able to solve the problem, they can offer support and sympathy. And one will cover burning down distractions.
Yeah, I'm going to cover that. I just want to linger a little bit here because burning down barriers and building up relationships is so important. I want to share a word for introverts. If you're an introvert like me, where you recharge in solitude and you really can be drained by being around people, even people like us, people who are introverts, we need these connections. We need to have someone who's walking through life with us. So I really want to spend time as you go through this first part of our 3-part framework, really doubling down on this idea that we need to have connections with other humans in order to really properly manage stress. All right, the second part of our framework is what we call burning down distractions, and that's harnessing the power of focus to truly get things done. You know, we live in a world where there's always things distracting us. There are notifications on our phones, and people can contact us in so many ways, either calling us, texting us, sending an email, walking up and talking to us. And it can be so distracting having those interruptions. And it really blinds us to the truth that our attention is finite. We only have so much attention that we can spend throughout a day. And if you're not careful, you can not even get to the end of your day, but have your attention totally drained away so that when there's things that come your way, you don't even have the resources to address them. And the key to this, the key to burning down distractions is really the simple power of no. We have to be willing to tell people, no, that's not something that I can work on right now. Or even to social media, no, I'm not going to check you right now because I need to harness my attention right now. Every tweet that we read, every Instagram post that we like, nicks away and ticks away at our attention. And it's really important to really get to the power of this, that we have to identify what's really valuable to me. What really is important in my life. And by doing that, by really focusing on what we think is really valuable, that's the way that we can identify those things and really get our action and our attention lined up with making a difference in those areas. So just take some time right now, even as you're watching this, think about what's really valuable to me. And if you think about it, it's probably not 20 or 30 things, even though your task list may be 20 or 30 things long, it's probably 1 or 2. And so we really have to do the work of narrowing it down. What are our core values and making sure that we give our attention enough space to progress those values and make them real. Now, the one thing that you simply must do to make a real dent is to get off social media. And I know that that's a lot to say, that some people may have fallen out of your chair, but yes, I recommend getting off of social media. But if you can't do that, at least take a fast from it. I recommend at least a month, uninstall the social media apps from your phone, and you will be amazed at how much of your attention you get back. That your attention is not being drained by tweets and retweets and comments and likes, but you'll be able to harness that freed up attention to really make a difference and to really get the values that you hold dear progress and make them real. So even if that's too much, right? Even if a 1 month fast, I would say at least put into a time box and say, okay, only between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. or whatever hour period works, I'm going to get my social media fix, and then I'm not going to shake it again until the next day. And I'm really trying to simplify it down because I really think people underestimate how much we lose out by always being on social media. And so that's one thing that I really encourage you to do in order to get your attention back.
Yoga, love that. I know sunrise, sunset, beautiful. So our next point is burning down illness and a focus on health. Software developers often trade health for productivity. Productive people do. But this often results in a future loss of productivity that outweighs whatever was temporarily gained. Burnout takes a physical toll on our bodies, on our mental and physical health. But if we improve our health, then we can build up resistance to the effects of burnout. This includes getting adequate sleep and staying hydrated throughout the day, especially in Texas where we live. We have to make sure we have that water and that we're taking care of ourselves. It's also important to get regular exercise and improve our nutrition. Companies can contribute to the health of their employees by doing yoga in the office, paying for gym memberships, and giving people mandatory no work times each week. These no work times shouldn't come from their vacation, and while they don't have to go to the gym, they should be encouraged to do so. So I like the no work times where we might say from 6 to 9, no emails, no phone, no work, just, engage, focus time with the family. So the one thing you simply must do, take walks. Working out often requires a fair amount of privilege to get access to weights and gym equipment. Working out can be time consuming, but most of us can take a walk. And for me, when I was doing my dissertation at Texas A&M University pursuing my PhD, and I got really, really stressed because I wanted to do such a good job. I started implementing walks in the evenings, and it's just a part of our life. And Anjuan and I walk together almost every single day. So we can start small, walk around the block once a day, maybe after dinner. Walking is free. It's a simple way to invest in your health and burn down illness. We've covered a lot, and Anjuan will talk about how to balance everything out.
I just want to go back to this Burndown chart because one of my favorite features of a Burndown chart is this ideal line, right? It represents perfection. But I don't want people to get bogged down by perfection. You might be thinking, okay, this is a 3-part framework. It's really simple. It's my relationships, it's my focus, and it's my health. But even though this framework is really simple and we believe it's powerful, you can get burned out worrying about burnout. And we don't want that to happen to you. And so what this means is that with the ideal line, one thing I realized, having led many teams across many sprints, is that I don't get hung up if the ideal line is not where I want it to be, right? Maybe we are a little bit higher than we like to be, and we're not where we want to be with burning down the work. But I know that there's a tolerance range where I know that my team has time to recover before the sprint ends. And so there will be times in your life where you're not perfectly managing the stress in your life. You're not maybe meeting with people the way that you like to, or maybe you skip a couple weeks at the gym, or maybe you just are binging on social media. Well, that's okay, as long as you take regular intervals and regular checkpoints with yourself and say, okay, things aren't where I want them to be, and I need to make sure that I get back into working out, or I'm going to take those walks that I started doing so well for several weeks until I fell off. And it's really key to have those regular checkpoints, maybe once a week or once a month, and maybe with a partner to walk through this together. But you want to have those checkpoints. And so don't be too worried about not being perfect. It's really the practices that we're trying to enable you to take hold of today. So I just want to go into the fact that, again, the practices are really what matters. And I like this picture because it shows that these rocks are balanced, and it's really a balancing act. You won't ever be able to balance the stressors in your life, but that shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to know, when am I outside of my stress tolerance? When am I outside of this 3-part framework? And that you really make space and time to get back on track. And so again, those regular check-ins are really so important. And you don't have to perfectly manage the stress that you have in your life. You have to be committed to regular practices that protect your relationships, your attention, and your health. Now, I have a couple of things that we put together, and Aneika and I'm going to go through these. And that's really, what do you do when there are scarce resources? You all, Anjuan and Aneika, it's great that you've shared with us these 3-part framework items. And yep, I can see how they are actionable, but what do we do when I don't have even enough to do that? And so we have a couple of slides. I'm going to go through the first 2. Aneika's going to do the last one. Going through this framework, what can we do to really put boots on the ground and make progress? So you might be saying, hey, and again, I mentioned this, I'm an introvert, or I just don't have access to a lot of people. Maybe I live in an area where I don't even feel safe going out and meeting with people at a coffee shop or something. Well, if you're an introvert, or if you don't have easy access to people, one simple thing that you can do if you have scarcity of people around you is to volunteer. And that means that you find a cause that really speaks to you, that makes your heart sing. And then you find those like-minded individuals who are organizing to make that cause a reality. And you can usually find these online, or maybe if you do have in your local neighborhood access, but I highly recommend joining this group. And a lot of groups are meeting virtually, where you can even not have to leave your house, and you can still take part. You can take part in planning. You can take part in brainstorming how you can make this call something that becomes real and that you move forward. And I know that when I've been able to volunteer and be able to be engaged in the community, then you get the sense of belonging to something bigger than yourself. And then not only that, but then you can connect with people who are also engaged in making that cause a reality. And so that can be extremely empowering as something to do. So if you can't do anything, get involved. Volunteering is a way to almost get automatic relationships where you know that you have a shared interest with a group of people. All right, so that's the first thing I think can put things where you can pick it up. Now you may think, well, yeah, I understand that my attention is finite, and you talk about social media, I don't even have a social media account because I stayed off that train a long time ago. Well, good for you, but I think that one simple thing that you can do, even if you have scarce resource, is just journal. And that's getting a pen and getting a piece of paper or a notebook and just writing down what's happening to you. And I really do recommend that you don't type it out on your phone or using a computer keyboard, but you actually write, because the act of writing actually reinforces memory, and it helps you to really feel that you're getting things out. Because one of the biggest things that I really enjoyed when I started journaling is getting things out of my head, right? There's just so many times when I have a lot in my head, and if I write it down, then I don't have to be afraid that I'm going to lose it. And that's a powerful aspect of journaling. But one other aspect of journaling that is really part of how this practice is so powerful is that I've gone back to journals that I wrote years ago, and I look at the things that were bothering me back then, and I don't even really care about those things. Like, that didn't even become a problem, or that was a lot bigger than I thought it would be. And by looking back on my past journal entries about my pain, that gives me hope that my current pain will one day be as irrelevant, that I can see that this is going to be something that will be worked out. And so by having that almost literal physical backup of your brain in the form of journals gives you perspective on what's happening to you today. And I think it's going to talk about the simplicity, the simple thing that you can do to take care of your health.
Well, we have a big yellow screen here, reminds me of Big Bird and a person walking. So we're gonna drill down on that a little bit. So taking walks, like we talked about. And some of you are thinking that walks aren't enough. You have to work out, and I agree with that, and I'm with that. And I agree that working out is crucial for good health, but it can be intimidating. Do I use free weights or use machines, or do I stretch before or after? Do I do high weights? Do I do low reps? It's also easy to get distracted. What's the first thing most of us do when we decide to start working out. Well, we might buy workout clothes, or I can't tell you how many times people have purchased new shorts or new shirts or workout gloves and all kinds of gear when they say, oh, I'm going to start working out. And then all that stuff, unfortunately, sometimes goes down to the bottom of the drawer after a few weeks of never being able to have the time or find the time or make the time to work out. And so the cycle continues when I start working out again and buying new clothes and so forth. So working out often requires a fair amount of privilege to gain access to weights, especially equipment, especially during COVID-19, where a lot of gyms are closing down. So let's just keep it simple. Again, we really want to encourage something that's simple and easy, and that's taking walks. Now you need clothes to walk outside, of course, but you don't need to buy new workout clothes. We want to start small. So you might want to just walk around the block, maybe once a day after dinner. It's free, and it's a simple way to invest in your health and burn down illness. So as software developers, most of you have used a Burndown chart to track your work. So you already have this great metaphor for managing stress and avoiding the dangers of burnout. If you use what we shared with you to protect your hearts, minds, and bodies, you'll be more productive and model better behavior for your colleagues at work, as well as the people in your personal life, people you live with. Building software requires motivated individuals, and reaching out, removing distractions, and revitalizing yourself will improve what you can deliver to your company, as well as to your end users and your stakeholders. Anjuan and I believe that healthy teams make healthy code, and burning down burnout will help you be a healthy member of your team. So we'll be rooting for you as you burn down the stressors in your life so that you can be the best version of yourself at work and also at home.
Thank you so much for listening to our talk. Again, we are rooting for you. We want to make sure that we continue the conversation. So this is how you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. Love a follow. We love a connection. And then we would also love to continue to talk with you about how you can get the stress in your life in a managed state and avoid burnout. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Take care.
Hi, I'm Aneika.
All right. Thank you both for that talk. That was really great. And I know it's definitely, applicable generally in tech, but I definitely feel like, especially after everything this year, there's a lot of burnt out just from even day-to-day life, let alone work. So thank you both. Are they here? I know they're here, but I just want to make sure their video still comes up.
Hello, we are here.
There we go. Okay.
We could not unmute ourselves, but we're here.
Yeah, we are. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. So thank you for joining us for our Q&A. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, I know I heard a lot of your suggestions on getting off social media, and one of the things I heard a lot is quit watching the news because it's incredibly stressful. You mentioned a couple times going for walks. Do you have suggestions on how to remember to engage in these? Because I know sometimes I should go for a walk, but after a week, I tend to just forget to do it. So sometimes things like this fall through the cracks.
Well, one thing for us is we actually overuse our phones. Probably we put a reminder in our phone, after dinner, 7 o'clock, go for a walk. We encourage one another. So if you have a neighbor or a friend that, lives near you, if you can go walking with them, that would be good, and kind of decompress and share your day with one another. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that after a while, once you put the practices in place, they become habits.
Mm-hmm.
And then you won't even need the phone because you're getting the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I also love that you mentioned volunteering. And I know I've had some friends that wonder why I'm always involved in some volunteer type of activity all the time. But I know you, Anjuan, had said when you volunteer, it helps you feel great, it helps you gain relationships. Do you have any good suggestions on how to find a group or a nonprofit or some other way to get involved with a group like that?
Yeah, a lot of them are again, if you have a faith-based link, that you can find probably a synagogue or a mosque or a church in your area if you're that inclined. That's a great way to get involved. But there's a lot of great technology groups. I'm a big fan of Black Girls Code, which is a very mission-driven group. They're a nonprofit, and they always like people to donate equipment or to mentor, and they're utilizing Zoom and other things like that. And so I think looking for nonprofits in the tech space, because we're all, I think, affiliated with technology, that's a great way to find a group to get involved with and probably find something that's aligned with what you're really passionate about.
Yeah. And then maybe after and before COVID, I know I used to also do a lot of volunteering for Habitat for Humanity. Just when you help other people, you just take the focus, all the ruminating that we may do, you think about other things, and it just really promotes mental health. For me, it does.
Yeah, and I volunteered with all girls robotics team. And since they're not meeting in person, they can't really build robots, but they've been trying to schedule all these things over Zoom and with other things. So it's kind of cool that still the volunteering opportunities have kind of popped up through that. Somebody had asked, how do you suggest talking to your company about ways they can, the company itself can help alleviate the burnout?
You want to take that one?
Well, I mean, one thing that's really important, I mean, I've been reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and, just having the uncomfortable conversations. It may not be uncomfortable for some people, really all depends on the culture of the organization. But if you have that psychological safety with your peers and with your subordinates, then I feel that sharing something like that hopefully should be palatable and to be received. But basically, just like we believe that healthy teams build healthy code, it takes healthy people to be involved and to be productive. And so it's not that they're losing anything by investing in the health of their employees or their team members. It's you're actually investing in them so they can be all they can be for themselves as well as for you. Anjuan?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in enterprise software development for a very long time, and just like you should not feel shy about asking your manager about hey, I need more RAM or I need a faster computer to do my job. Taking consideration for your human body is part of doing your job, and the ability to present the best version of yourself, the most balanced and with stress in a managed state, that will benefit the company. And so I think that just like you would be asked, well, to say that the physical tools that I have right now aren't really suitable to me doing my best work, you should say, look, I'm managing these items here that will help me bring my best self to work. And hopefully if you frame it that way, then your boss will see that as easy to approve as an upgrade in RAM or adding more CPUs or an SSD hard drive.
Right. But I just want to say, I'm just glad that you all would even accept or promote a session like this, because we need to normalize health and balance. I mean, I remember when I was a consultant, I literally felt guilty asking to go have dinner at 7 o'clock because they just wanted you to work constantly. And I think just normalizing, we have to eat, we have to drink water, we have to get enough sleep. That is just a part of the human experience. And it seems weird saying that, but I definitely remember being in a world where I literally felt guilty to just ask for the basic things I needed to be the healthy Aneika.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. We need actually more of these kinds of talks in a lot of our conferences and events. And in fact, I've been trying to watch some of the faces on the call while reading some of the Slack comments, and so much I kept seeing like, oh my God, I need this talk. I need this talk. I need this talk. So that's been great to see. Another question, somebody had mentioned that they get a lot of stress from work. It's things they can't control, like a really high workload, management being fairly distrustful of them, things like that. Do you have suggestions on how to start making progress on burnout prevention when you can't really interact with things like that?
I think one thing that Anjuan and I talk a lot about is we use, I guess, timelines a lot. So if you were to talk to your manager and you would say, these are the things that I have to do, then you would say, okay, these are the 10 things that I have to do. So in these few days and hours, I would do this and I would do this. And maybe if you walk them through it, then maybe they would be able to come to the realization, wow, it is unrealistic that we're having you do all of this. Maybe we should cut off of these 10 things, 8 and 9. So it will take some work. The framing, always, address people with dignity and respect, what I'm sure everyone will. But unless you let people know what you're feeling and going through, they may not know. And, an old adage that we hear is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. I mean, that sounds kind of, bizarre, but it's the truth. Like, if you don't say it, then they don't know. And so we've got to, and I remember as a consultant, I had to, get strong within myself and say, hey, I have to go eat dinner, and not ask and just kind of like say it. And it seems weird, but it depends on where you work in the culture of the organization. where those conversations could be easier to have than others. Anjuan?
I think all that's good. I think that if possible, well, before I say this, your essential humanity and being treated with dignity and respect is not something that you should have to ask for, right? That's something that as a human being you should get. The reality is that we live in a capitalist society where often people are treated and viewed as simple resources, and that's the unfortunate reality of where we live. But what you can do is hopefully use that to your advantage. In an ideal world, you'll have a track record of performance that is showing that you are valued to the organization, and you can hopefully leverage that track record before you hit that burnout state and say, look, for me to continue doing these things and delivering at this level and meeting the things that you want me to do, and sometimes you have to appeal to people's egos and say, these are things that I need. These are the accommodations that I need to continue to be this person for you. And often, if you have that track record that you've established, if you dig your well before you're thirsty, then you'll be able to leverage that, hopefully, to get some accommodations for what you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you both very much for both your talk and all these great answers to these great questions.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
You're welcome. And if you want to ask more questions, they'll be around on Slack. If you're one of our registered Heartifacts interactive participants, you can always ask them on Heartifacts live channel. So we're going to split everybody out into breakout rooms now. So here in a moment, those registered Heartifacts interactive participants are welcome to switch over to breakout B, the Zoom call. So that's on the attendee portal. You just click on that and jump over there. We'll split you apart into separate rooms. You all can chat for a little bit with each other. You can reflect on Anjuan and Aneika's talks or share some of your own experiences and stories, but you don't have to feel any pressure to share anything you're not comfortable with. We'll go ahead and send you off. Meet back here at about 6:04 Eastern or 3:04 Pacific. See you in a bit. Bye.
Hey folks, Colin Dean, Managing Director of Code and Supply here. Before we get to our next talk, I do want to show you a little bit of our Heartifacts merch. So if you were paying attention during our interstitial there, you probably saw this slide, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So we've got some really cool Heartifacts logo merch. We've got the Heartsplosion logo on all kinds of things. I actually have this beanie. It's really cool. The cup and mug is awesome. And eventually it'll probably show this funny picture of myself. There we go. So go check it out. If you haven't already gotten some merch, please do so. There's a coupon code, YAY Heartifacts, all one word, all uppercase, and it'll get you a little bit off. I think it's a 10% off discount code. So please do give that a shot. There's some other stuff on the store as well that you will certainly enjoy. And with that, I think we're ready to go to our next talk.
All right. Thank you, Colin, and welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the first breakout. I jumped in real quick and saw some good conversations going there, and you are always welcome to kind of hang out there, or we also have a hallway track you can stick in. Some of us have remote jobs anyway, but 2020 has brought a lot of people to being remote now. So when we don't see ourselves every day or see our coworkers every day, it makes it a lot harder for us to see all of our coworkers as people. And the same thing for kind of our software as users. And Dr. Simmons mentioned in her talk that some things like that, when we're burnt out, it's hard for us to see some other people's humanity, which I think is a good lead in for our next talk from Kristen Seversky. Kristen's a product owning, code writing, design thinking people person that wants to make tech more meaningful and ethical in our world. Her easily excited, high energy, and deeply curious personality tosses her in a lot of directions, and she enjoys the idea of bringing more of ourselves to our work. When she's not at a computer, which is rarely the case, you can find her running around with her dog, draining her energy in some game or sport, or continuing her stream of consciousness on Twitter. Kristen's talk's called Keeping It Human, Swapping Code for Connections. Take it away, Kristen.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna hit the share now. Hopefully that get the right screen too. And all right, so hopefully you can see my intro screen, Keeping It Human, Swapping Code for Connections. Good to go. I do want to warn that this discussion, trying to put this in a half-hour session was difficult. So I did try to do my best to capture not only my own story, so you can see from my own example as a person that went through this, what you could expect from trying to shift in your career, but also why I wanted to shift in my career and my ever pursuit of keeping it human and bringing the most of myself to my roles, what that can mean in our current industry. So to help set some expectations, I did give a bit of an outline. So what are you about to hear? You can expect to hear in this talk a lot about career shifts, as well as my own story as an example. So I didn't go like off the wall here with a billion role changes, but I did do some that caught a lot of people off guard. And I think that's the reason why when I bring this stuff up in other circles, people are like, oh, I'm on the fence of this kind of change. What can I expect? And I get like messaging on the side of, hey, what else did you go through? Or what can I do with this? So once I started to see more of that, I was like, well, here, I will put it on a platform. We can talk about it. And maybe this will scratch some more brains into thinking about exploring their own role changes and what that can mean for yourself. So the third bullet there is navigating status quo and the realities of our current, our society, our industry, because you'll see in pretty critical times of my past where I was faced with a make or break decision. Like, okay, you did all this stuff, you did the work, now pick what you're gonna do and stick with it. So I wanna talk a little bit about that and how that impacts us and that ability to be flexible in roles. And ultimately, I want this to start a conversation. As my intro states, and as you'll see in these slides, I'm very extroverted. I like connecting with people. And if it means talking about things as an example, that would make me very happy. So, find me on Twitter, find me in the Slack. We can talk about this as much as we want. What this will not be is a tip about each individual role I had. I don't want to make this like a deep dive of like, here's how to be a software dev, here's how to be in design thinking. Like you're not going to get that in this talk. You're also not going to get a truly deep dive in my experience, nor is this a talk about where I've worked, because it's more about the shift and the reality around that than where I worked or what. And I also try very hard to avoid long-winded tangents. You'll see a couple times in the slides where I'm going to block myself from going off on deep end, but I put parentheses, disclaimer. So that's the agenda. We're going to quickly go through my background, just me personally, see me as a little one. Picking a path, that impact of having to pick and choose, like, okay, what are you gonna do with your life and your career? How I chose dev, a big shift that happened later, and then how I got to product life. The core of this talk that I want is to focus on the FAQ section. I know we have breakouts later, but I've since in this whole journey surfaced a lot of questions that I get over the years that maybe I can just offer to you instead of you having to ask me, because I think that's usually what people come talk to me about anyways. And then I'll just wrap up with a quick summary. So let's get rolling. Okay, so who the heck am I? Quick background. I'm telling you this because I think it's important to know my personality type, how someone like me navigates in the industry, and how I choose roles, and to see that a lot of the stuff, people, is very deeply ingrained. So this is a snapshot of when I was 7.5. This was an Easter morning. I'm running around, my brothers, I have 4 older brothers. They're running around behind me looking for eggs, but I'm on the ground and completely pumped. Why? Because I got this little slip of paper in one of my eggs. You can't read it. I was going to show you the video. I have this on video, but it wouldn't have translated. But on that piece of paper, it says 15 minutes on AOL. And I kid you not, at 7.5, I just wanted nothing more was to like be near the internet, be by computers, near devices. So this is a deeply ingrained fascination that I've had since I was young that was at least my kind of beacon of, I think I want careers or opportunities in this space or whatever lets me stay close to this. And I'm grateful I had this because I also tripped upon a really nice math teacher. People, thank your teachers. They help you more than you know. That guided me towards programming because she's like, okay, you like a lot of people, you like connecting with people, you like computers, and you like math. I will avoid a whole tangent about math being related to good development, by the way. See, tangent's not going to do it. But I happen to like math because of the puzzles. And so she guided me towards a programming class. And to me, I was like, all right, well, I'll go try this out. I really like being near these devices. And people, I'll tell you, this right here was a game changer. I took the sole programming class in high school. I was about 14 or 15 when I played with Visual Basic. And it was like the first time where I saw all of my interests coming together into one spot because I could make these dialog boxes and screens, and I could add colors, and I could then program it to do what I want with the patterns and the syntax. So, and just ultimately I'm thinking of like, how can I make things that help people and put it online and all these other dreams that came to life in front of me through programming. So that is what led me towards this whole, like, okay, I guess I want to do programming. And I'm glad I had this because here's the next thing that we did. Society slams this at you when you're a teenager and says, okay, kid, what do you want to do with your life? And as someone who's like, that's almost like putting the cage around me, like, okay, well, pick one thing, hope you don't screw it up because you got to get this right. And it's really hard to change. Like all of these things permeated my mind as a teenager. And I tried really hard to guide myself towards something. But once again, that same math teacher, and man, she's helped me in my life, but she came up to me and was like, hey, so I know you're trying to decide on colleges. Have you thought about this one over here or that? Because I really thought I could only just do like IT. I thought it was going to be like a vanilla degree. And that was just my life now. I'll be in IT. But fortunately, she let me know about Rochester Institute of Technology, which is out here in Rochester, where I live now. And I ended up coming here for college and found a degree that had a bit of everything in it. And so once again, you can see in my personality type, I'm trying to bring more to a hard decision that usually wants us to do like one. So I managed to wiggle through that, went to RIT, there's your proof. I didn't buy that image, sorry, Grad Images, it's proof though, I'm keeping the watermark. And I got my 2 degrees and was like, yay, I know what I'd like to do in life. But then boom, again, what one career path do you want? And it's like, oh, okay, once again, I'm kind of stuck with picking and choosing. So I ended up, through my degree and everything I had behind me, I went for software development, right? So my first foray into my career was in software development. And I'm not saying this negatively, by the way. As I kept repeating this presentation, I was like, is this coming off like I begrudgingly went into dev? It's not the case at all. It was, once again, going back into like 2010, figuring out what can I do to bring the most of my humanity to a role. And at the time, the option in front of me seemed to be software development. And so that was my new home and I loved it. So this is me in 2013 at Breaking Development. That was the name of the conference at the time, which then changed to Beyond the Desktop. So this is Nashville. Everyone trustingly put down their devices and let people take pictures. Like, remember when we used to detach from our devices? This is what you can get. So this really embodied where I was in my career at this point. I really felt at home, like my homeostasis was here. But at the same time, I was in my second software job at this point. And in that job, I was able to bring a lot to the table because I was a sole developer. Let me rephrase that. Because I was a sole developer at this second job of my life, I was able to bring a lot of me to the table because I had to solve problems for a national company that had clients all over the US, but it was just me. I was just building databases and UIs to help connect, and we were maintaining the in-house server. And then at the end of the day, I had to be the support person for everything I built as well, which that scratches an itch that I don't see as much in different software places. So that brought my Keep It Human to life in my coding job, because I not only was having to do all those other pieces, but to hear firsthand from the people themselves complaining about using your code that you built is an experience that I think more of us should have. And in that role, that's when I realized, ooh, I really need to stay close to end users and close to customers and people and try to keep all of this as human as possible, because it's very easy to splinter out and start getting into your silos. And then next thing you know, you're just building and coding, which happened a lot. There were a lot of times where I was just like building something and you lose concept of the end goal and you just throw that code out, you miss the mark. So back to the point of like, okay, well, I need to do something else in my career because that's what society tells you. It's like, you got to move forward, keep moving forward. So I was like, okay, I guess I go for senior developer. And once again, asterisks around tangents. I can make a whole presentation on what does senior mean? What does that mean in this industry? What are we saying to people when we put senior on things? I'll avoid the tangent. I just want to throw that out there as a bone to pick. But either way, I became a senior developer, but then something happened that I did not plan. A wild design thinking training appeared. So in my third role, when I was a senior software developer, the company I worked for at the time decided to bring on a design thinking training. And I lit up because thinking about back to my college degree and the fact that I found all these ways to blend all of my interests, yet I still had to pick certain facets at a time. I was like, oh, it felt like you're seeing your old hat. You're like, oh, I could bring this old hat back and wear it, and it's okay. Like I didn't have to just leave that one behind. So it was a 3-day training. I got very excited. And for those of you that don't know what design thinking is, this is a still from the Cooper Professional Education video. They have crash courses on Vimeo. I do have to put a damper on real quick, people. Cooper had to shut their doors this year because of COVID. So, as I sit and give this talk, I know we're all here virtually and we're doing this and it's possible. I do like to take a moment to really highlight the fact that we're in the middle of this wild time, weird time, and even some of the resources that you're seeing might not be available for a long time because of a pandemic. So that's a bummer, but in solidarity with what they trained me on and how they impacted my career, I was like, well, I'll give them a still from what I learned. So this is a high level view of the design thinking process. It's essentially adding that research friction up front in the process. So when you're going to start working on solutions or problems to solve, you want to focus on understanding the end users and the people involved. So, and understand is a kind of loaded word, right? But it's empathizing, getting into the shoes of, and looking at their environment, finding stories. And then with those stories and those details, you can start to envision. This is where the sticky note stuff comes in. You see people putting sticky notes and everything. And then you get into prototyping. So like that's when you start to actually get into code, is that prototype phase, to just make high level, just tinker a bit with the idea that you have, and you iterate. Because I'm just speaking for myself, but a lot of my career and observing the world around me through the past decade, it's a lot of like, I have an idea, code it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's nice, but you're missing a lot of in-between pieces. And are you sure you know why you're coding this or who you're coding it for? And it's all those big, meaty, purpose-driven questions that just get bypassed for the sake of move fast, break things. So anyways, having this design thinking come in was a breath of fresh air for me. It brought me into this type of role and dynamic where you can work with people from across different departments and actually see how people think from a vantage point of sales versus engineering versus marketing, and even your CEO. Like we had our CEO involved with these sessions, and it was just really fun to get different ideas and hash this together. And I think it really brings forward a North Star for more people to align to and work cohesively together. Keep it human, all right? So this was the big shift though, not to be a spoiler alert, but this was when I was like, oh, I really like this. How can I infuse this more in my day-to-day? How can I, because I can't just cut this off now. You can't just have this training and then cut this off and go back to normal. And fortunate for me, my company actually opened up a full-time role for this, and I took it. And let me tell you, people were deeply confused when I went from all that time of building up my software dev cred to suddenly this stuff. And I got a lot of this. People were just like, wait, so you code, but you're doing design thinking, but you're not, like, the cognitive dissonance when you make a shift like this is strong, and people are going to look and ask a lot of questions. And even worse, they like to think that they know that you're not going to like it. Like I had a lot of people that were like, oh, you'll get bored. You'll miss it. You'll go back. And that's to be expected, right? Like if you know me and how much I enjoyed my software side, the development side, that's a fair assessment. But, you know, what I wanted to do to counter all that is show people that I'm not leaving anything behind. I'm not just dropping and running. I'm bringing my software development with me into a new role to get to a different vantage point together. And some of the highlights, I don't even have to really amplify it too much. It's just, here's what kind of happened. I will disclaim that I don't own these impacts. Like this wasn't just like because of me. It was because of design thinking in this opportunity. I did get to see Scrum teams looking at who and why a little more consistently and not just jumping into the what and how they were building things at the user story level. So even just peppering in some of this at the team level is an improvement from the usual just build fast. And product owners and businesses, business folks around me were recognizing different strategies. And instead of just jumping to, oh, that's the hottest thing to build, or that's the most important, they were able to stop and just put that friction up and ask and go, hey, are we doing this? Is this really the most important thing? Who, why? And again, just repeating that kind of process. Same for sales and marketing. Instead of waiting for a window to just place a product in and just say, yeah, you need this. Like I could tell there was different discussions that were listening for opportunities to solve problems in different ways. And that even actually led to a lot of sales coming to our dev teams like, hey, I had this call and I was going to give them this product, but then I thought, what if we bring this over here with this feature? And it started to help build a backlog for future implementations. So it's not to make this out like this is a magical thing, but it did impress me at the time of how much a little nudge in this direction makes a big difference. So that was, and plus I got to have a lot of fun with it. I got to switch over to a new realm and give talks from different angles. Instead of talking about, you know, my code editor or something cheesy in the dev side, like I was able to go over and talk about why should you care about the human experience? And I think because of that shift, it let me bring an angle from my dev history on top of this very necessary, you should care about the human experience. And it was just a good time all around. Unfortunately, the company started taking a different angle. And so I was kind of faced once again with, you have to make a choice on another role. You have to move on. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And I still, again, despite all this history of trying to bring the most of me into a role, I still was like, oh no, do I go back to code? Do I stick to this design work? What do I do? And I ended up going with product. So as I got to know product more, and I assure you, I can ask everyone in this room what product means to them, you're going to get a different answer. And I can also attest to that for this reason. There's memes for days on products or product people. And I can tell you, I can identify with each of these at a different day at any given point. So yeah, there's a lot to learn on the product side. But for me, I wanted to still have that role that let me bring in that quantitative, qualitative analysis that I got from my design thinking, but also be close to the developer so I can keep that kind of, that code dev day-to-day feeling as well. And product ownership really gave me that opportunity. So, and it's the best of all of my worlds to kind of distill all of that. I'm still close to code. I have multiple teams I work with that I get to see day-to-day how they ram into things. I'm still among the developers. I see how they think and dig into code or bugs and limitations. I will joke in meetings where I'm like, I'm putting on my dev hat, just deal with me. But if you go this path, you're going to run into this issue with this service. And so I can still bring all that in. Plus, I'm also bringing in the fact that I I didn't think about making my actual product level more tool efficient. So I've subsequently ended up building things for the product level that are solutions. And that's kind of been a fun element of blending my two roles together even more so. And as for the design thinking side of my past, I'm still interviewing end users. That's a big part of product ownership, and gathering those stories. Like I literally like to go sit in our different departments and just be like, what's your world like? What do you do? What do you need? To make sure that I can be that bridge to our development and making sure that we're building the right things. Same with identifying personas and all that wonderful jazz of design thinking, of making sure that you know who you're building for and finding that why. So this is all hopefully reassuring to folks that if you are on that precipice of like, I need to do something different, that you don't leave this stuff behind. It comes with you. So I did want to leave at least, the 10 minutes for the frequently asked questions section. So hopefully by me giving these to you, that will reduce the questions you have later for me. But either way, some main ones are, let's say I'm considering a switch. How might I decide it's a good idea? And this is deeply personal. I don't feel comfortable saying, yes, it's a great idea, like across the board. It's to each their own. But I do have some ways that I know I help myself navigate whether this was the right idea. So asking yourself like what the day-to-day change would be, what kind of goals are you looking for, or what's making you want to get out of the role you're in, really checking in with those motives to see, is this being driven by something different, or am I just bored? I'm someone who gets a little bit uncomfortable when I'm too comfortable. So it's another thing where I'm like, okay, I've been here long enough. This is time to do something different. So maybe that's something else that might be in the back as a motive that you're not really recognizing. And another one I think is important for this question is, are you able to change your mind? Because some people, they want to try this out, and sometimes you might get into it and you realize, and you might not be able to make any adjustment from there. For instance, if you're up and moving for a new role, like I would weigh that risk a little bit, because I had the luxury of being in the same company. They knew who I was. They knew what I was interested, like what my goals were. So it wasn't like this jarring shift within the company. So those are all little kind of warnings that I would ask you if you're on this path. What's a misconception about product that you had as a developer and how that changed? So because of my roles, I didn't have a whole plethora of product owners. So I don't have like this anecdotal evidence of one assumption, but I did really have that kind of Steve Jobsy approach to product of like, you got one person who just has a vision that they just want to see happen. And I thought it was very individualistic. So I was like, oh, well, maybe, each product owner really has hard visions that they just drive. And now that I'm in the product space, quite different. I will note that it all depends on the size of your company too and your structure, but I personally see myself as more of a product coordinator. I look over a lot of our platform needs and make sure that things are, just moving along and fluidly staying aligned so that it's not just this ramming effect of different teams clashing together. So that one definitely I learned in real time, very much a different thing than what I expected. Question 3, what skills did you pick up when you shifted to product? I really wish I could tell you that I got better at writing short, concise, and sweet emails. I think that that's something that really good product people are good at, or just people in general that are, especially remote now. If you can write a really good email that gets the point across in a couple minutes, bravo. But the biggest one, and this is one that I don't know if I would have gotten as a developer, I think about that often, not dying on every hill. That is definitely a lesson from product that I've been forced to face, because I feel like in my dev sphere of influence, I was able to see whether it was a bug or a path I wanted to take with the code. I had that control to just go do that thing. And you could just be like, yeah, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that. Bringing that attitude to products, especially in a big company like mine, is you have to watch it, because then you could start, burning out and wanting to take on everything. And so that was a big lesson to watch for between these roles. Question 4 is, what do you and don't you miss about your old roles? Okay, so the big one is, I miss putting on my headphones, finding a really good playlist, and just getting lost in code. That is something that you cannot replicate. I can't find a way to scratch that itch in different roles. Like that is one that if you still have that in your role right now, cherish that one, because that's essentially what got me into software and why I was interested in it, is because I found something where I can get lost in, and with all my interests, it was hard to cough that up. But at the same time, I recognize that I don't want to do that every day though. It's not something I need to do every day. It's why I'm like, okay, cool. I know I can go back to that. I will always have code in my back pocket if I want to. What else can I do to help wrangle people and focus on the human element and less on the code element? Question 5, what advice would you give yourself if you can go back when you decide to change career paths? The biggest advice I can give is just pace yourself. I think people think that these are little modest jumps from role to role. It could even be within your own company. Like, just pace yourself, reset your expectations, give yourself room to absorb what's going on. If you haven't gleaned yet, I tend to be a little more fast paced and I get really eager to just take things on and run. But this role change it took time not only to set the expectations of everyone else, but even just to get my own understanding of what I was going through on top of the reality check of being in a new company. Like, all that stuff added up together. And I wish I could just go back and say, you're doing okay. You don't have to have this mastered in 2 weeks. Like, that's not even possibly realistic. So just giving yourself space to absorb those changes. Okay, so I threw a lot at you. I have a too long didn't read because I know there's a lot here. It's easy for me to meander on this one. If anything stood out to you or you want to get deeper into any of these topics, by all means, come find me. But here's my too long didn't read. It's check the rules in your head, because I'm hoping the takeaway from this talk is that you can see how often in my life I had to do this, like, I have to pick one, I have to do this, I have to do that. Now I go to senior, now I do, like, there's a lot of robotic cues in my world, in my career, that I kind of wish I could have checked them more and just tested them more, especially since, thinking back to the design thinking, that was completely off the map. I didn't plan that, and that came in, and it was just an opportunity to flex in a different way and take on a role in a different way. So if you don't check those rules and you don't expand that, that thinking in your mind, you might miss stuff like that and say, well, that's nice, but I'm a developer. And then you're forever in that column when you could totally be doing other things altogether. So double check that you're giving yourself space to explore those paths and find out what better suits you. Spot the lesson. This one, I say this kind of snarkily because I feel like with this whole pandemic right now, we're all in the middle of trying to figure out what the lesson with all this is. Like, what can we take from this in this time into the future that isn't, that is productive and helpful. But pandemics aside, if possible, each role can give you a bit of a lesson to take forward, because there's not a single role that I've had that I look back and think that was a waste of time, right? Like, I want to reduce that mindset that you drop these things and that nothing's relevant, even between industries. Even if you switch industry, I guarantee you're going to bring something from that last one over to the new one that will help you in some way. And that's back to if you spot that lesson and carry it. Just for example, though, I did want to add an example, like the not dying on every hill. That was my lesson, right? That was my most recent product lesson, that as a concrete example of, I would probably keep running into that problem if I didn't just go, oh, this is my thing. I have to grow through this. This is my thing. So it helps you to unstick yourself as well. So hopefully that is a way to spin a potentially not so fun experience into something positive for yourself. Nothing is forever. If anything, I think this past year has shown us a lot that what we thought is the normal forever is apparently not. And I'm personally kind of the personality type that if the table's flipped, I'm like, what else can we throw in the air? So nothing's forever. Lots of things are changing all the time, especially in our industry, especially in the world around us. Try not to lock yourself in. I get that it's helpful for pushing yourself along and trying to stay focused in an industry that's full of options and distractions, but just maybe ease up on that once you've got a path, because you don't want to burden yourself with, this is my life now, and you start to spin. Nothing's forever. I want to also raise the importance of knowing that, okay, I didn't like that. So say some of you do heed some of this advice, if it's even advice, or you get inspired to go try something different. It's okay to not like whatever you try. If you get to that point and you're like, oh, just kidding, this was not what I thought, because, with an asterisk around this, you can't always tell what the role is going to be from the outside until you're in it, like descriptions are tough. You got to really be in a place before you're like, oh, this is not what I thought, my bad. But that's good. It's okay, because knowing what you don't like to me is arguably as good as knowing what you do like, to help narrow down options for yourself in the future to keep yourself on a good path. And then my ultimate takeaway, my last slide here, is look for some bigger boxes. I was able to successfully navigate, of course, through my, I have privileges and just the wonderful network of people I know too, that always helps. but just being able to push and challenge those notions of you have to be this, and that includes only this, and you can't bring this hat here. Because I'm living proof that if you kind of want to wiggle it in, you probably find a role for yourself somewhere along the lines to bring more of yourself. And I think when we can bring more of ourselves, that's back to the keep it human notion. We're actually sharing more of just more vantage points and more of that inclusion around us, and be able to create much better solutions that speak to humans on the other side. So look for those bigger boxes and ways to bring more of yourself. All right, that's all I got, but thank you so much, Heartifacts, for having me. I appreciate being able to have this talk, especially after all the random conversations I've had in various DMs about this. So if anything struck you, you can find me on Twitter. I am a stream of consciousness type, so fair warning. You're not gonna make me feel bad if you're like, she's too much. It's just is what it is. But either way, here to help. Thank you.
And thank you, Kristen. We at Heartifacts appreciate having you as well. Do you have a good pronunciation for your Twitter name?
It's just Kristen, but in leet. So it's not really a pronunciation. It's just my name and numbers.
I was kidding.
Oh. I'm very literal on these. I'm like, maybe for 5, 7.
That's fine. One of the things I really liked was you mentioning about how changing roles or jobs always results in you taking something the next position with you. And one of the things I've found is I call myself a polyglot engineer because it feels like at every job working in a different language or totally different role. And so I see a lot of that transition going from like the types of problems I might solve kind of carry over and finding new ways to do things too. So I really like that. Do you think there's anything to be said for maybe, let's say, a developer trying to get at least a little bit of a part in the product roles, like you're shadowing a PM or, or take on a...
That's, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but I see your head with that. And like, part of me says yes immediately. Because I mean, at least personally, I love when developers are like, I want to get closer to the end user. I want to see what they're dealing with. And because more often than not, I'm used to developers who are like, Kristen, I don't care about that. I want to just code over here. And I try to distill that as the PO. So thinking of my own software dev history, I had to tell my boss at the time, I was like, I really like working with people. So, and I remember he was like, really? I was like, oh, wow. I really thought that was clear. So don't assume that the people around you or the folks that let you work in different capacities know that you want to do that. I would highly recommend that you just go talk to that manager or whomever and say, I'm very interested in this. What can we do? Because I just personally would be very shocked if they're like nothing. They could probably bring you into some user studies or whatever sort of research that they do. And please, by all means, bring it closer to the code.
Yeah. I've always appreciated at least like dabbling a little bit in the other areas just to be familiar with the other pieces that are kind of going on. Somebody had asked, what do you think you would have done differently if you'd wanted to change roles, but not within the same organization?
That one's trickier because I honestly think I needed that internal trust to make that kind of gap. Because I kept thinking, I'm like, could I have made that same bridge to another company without the backing that I had in my current company? So I don't take that for granted. I think that definitely makes it a smoother transition because I would have been knocking at doors for products saying, hey, I've been a software developer over here and all this, but like, I really want to do product. And I think they would have been like, So yeah, that would have been a bit different, but it's hard to say. Sometimes companies see what you bring just as a person too. It's not so much your resume and bullets on it. So I don't want to like make anyone think it's going to be possible, but it was definitely a smooth thing for me.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on exploring like these alternate paths without actually switching those roles?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of just, you have to do a little bit of your own homework and looking around of what those roles mean. Maybe just, if you can ask people that are in your company, like, what's your day-to-day like? I think shadow sessions are valid. In my company, I'm at a bigger company, but we do have people come and shadow and they're from completely different departments and that's fair. And if you don't have something like that, maybe start a way to start showing each other these different skill sets. Because if that means that you're bringing more of what you want to do in your heart for the role you have to the table, that's a huge win. You know, I personally think it's more draining to try and fit myself in a small box of like, I'll just do only this. That's a lot harder on me than being like, oh, can I go explore over here and see what I can do over here too? No? Okay, well. So yeah, just maybe just ask around or follow people on social media. I know I'm following like a very get back off of social media talk, but I do think social media is extremely powerful for learning what you can expect in these different roles. So it can be a good tool for that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you notice if you're blocking your own growth? Like, for example, when those assumptions in your head don't really want to go away?
Yeah, that one's tricky because, that's where I was having a hard time painting out this path, because I kind of trust my gut though. If there's a point where I really feel like I'm being more held back or my hands are tied, that's usually my tell of, okay, why do I feel this way? Is it because I just don't align with the style? Is it the process that's not letting me grow? The management, the leadership. So more often than not, I'm going to assume it's an external force that's holding me back more than myself. But it's also, I'm still working on breaking that thought that I have to do one thing and do it, forever. And I think since I got past that point as the design thinking thing, I've been much better at going like, ooh, what else can I do? And I will warn you, not every place is up for that. You got to find the right places that want you to be that person. Because, when I work at a bigger company, people are like, stay in your lane. You're supposed to do this. But it's at the same time, I think people in the end know that you're just trying to bring more of yourself in.
Yeah. Were you able to inspire or mentor any peers or coworkers along the way with your journey to consider these alternate paths or roles?
Not so much on the path just yet, at least not like directly. I haven't been asked like, let's sit down and talk about role shifts. I think I did see light bulbs along the way of people going, oh, I'll never forget one of my old coworkers. I really looked up to him, still do, as a developer. And I was like, you're such a good coder. You're so good at what you do. And I remember he shot back. He's like, yeah, but you can learn code. He's like, the other elements of like connecting business and people and all these other departments, he's like, that's a trickier thing. And I was like, ooh. So I think that turned on some light bulbs in my dev team of like, it's not all just about code, you got to kind of breathe a little bit, bring in some humans here and have more of these discussions about what else is going on.
All right. I think that's about it for Q&A. So thank you, Kristen, for that. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And I think I'm reading that during the break, we'll also have a meditation session. So I think a little bit of stretching and stuff like that too. So if you are a registered Heartifacts attendee, go check out the attendee portal. You'll have a link to the hallway track. Otherwise, if you want, we're going to take about a 10-minute break, grab a snack, a drink, or do whatever you need to do, I guess, to take a break. We'll be back here in about 10 minutes. So about 6:50 Eastern or about 3:50 Pacific. See you then.
Hey, folks. Glad to have you back here. One thing I want to tell you a little bit about, Code and Supply has this really cool job board where you can go and post jobs. You can see some of the jobs that we have available. You can post them if you are a job, if you are a hiring manager, or if you maybe you just want to get a really cool referral bonus through your company and meet some new friends. We have this customized job board that uniquely syndicates to our mailing list, our Twitter, and our Slack with jobs for freelancers, and also going into the freelance channel. So whenever you post on this, we get a message that goes into our job board on the Code and Supply Slack. It goes out to Twitter. If it's marked as a freelance job, it also goes into the freelance channel as well. It works really great. We've had companies say that they love how it works and it's working out for them. It's included with any paid membership to Code and Supply. So paid membership starts at just $10 per month. And you can get your open roles or go find roles. And you can put these open roles in front of engaged professionals that are already chatting right there in Slack. So please do check that out at codeandsupply.co/jobs. And I believe we are ready for our next talk. Sarah, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Colin. And welcome back, everyone. Hope you got a drink or a snack because we're about to wrap up with our final speaker for today. Next up, we have Alicja Raszkowska. A little bit about Alicja. She's gone through multiple careers in tech until she finally landed on a DevOps role and loved it. She resides in Vancouver, British Columbia, where she works on infrastructure. And in her free time, she plays the ukulele, crochets cute animals, and tries to watercolor. She's going to let you know how you can support immigrant team members. Take it away, Alicja.
Hi, I'm Alicja, and I'm going to talk today about supporting your immigrant team members. I'm an immigrant myself. I moved to Canada a little bit less than 3 years ago, and I've been in Vancouver, BC ever since. And I'm currently on my second Canadian job. I work in DevOps at Clio, which is a Canadian company that builds software for lawyers. And I wanted to talk about this topic because it's both my shared experience of being an immigrant and working through that, and also my experience of people supporting me through that and helping me get to where I am and thrive. And I think a lot of those strategies and ideas might be useful for other people as well. I would like to thank the organizers. I think there is the organizing work that I should thank them for first, that often invisible work that goes into making a conference happen, of getting the speakers or just like the timetables of everything and putting on a website and getting folks interested and wanting to take part in it. And there's a lot of that. And I know that because I sometimes organize conferences too. But maybe predominantly, I think I want to thank them for organizing a conference that's focusing on building communities in tech and how we communicate, because we rarely get dedicated spaces for that are so big and focused. We can get, a side conference track, maybe a presentation, maybe a workshop, but having this bigger conversation and having it be center stage, it's what's important for me. So thank you for doing that. I would also like to just point out that, I'm an immigrant and I'm a woman and I work in tech, and all of that makes my experience helpful to understand certain contexts and relevant, but there are many ways in which I am privileged. So when you're thinking about supporting your team members, try to understand what their situation is and try to talk to a more diverse group of people who have lived through this experience. And maybe not all of them have to be white and European or cisgender or able-bodied, and have a pretty easy time coming to a new country without worrying about finding a job right away. So just keep that at the back of your mind, that when I talk about it, I mostly talk about my own experience, and it would be great if you just reached out to other people or educated yourself more on other people's experiences. I'm going to be talking about what immigration is, why do people migrate, what it is like to be an immigrant in a new country, and maybe some strategies that you could use if you're an immigrant to try and find a place for yourself to thrive. And I'm also going to talk about some strategies that if you are a team member of an immigrant, you could think about using them to support them and to have a stronger connection. If any of those topics makes you uncomfortable, please make sure you're only watching this talk if it doesn't make you too uncomfortable. And if it does, just feel free to drop off. I won't mind. I want you to be here in a place that lets you learn and explore this topic and not be stressed about it or worry about anything triggering happening. And I think the main thing I would like you to take away from this presentation is curiosity. So curiosity is something that helps us connect as humans in general, no matter in what situations we meet and how we interact with each other. And even if you don't know what to do, or you've never done it before, or you're not sure what someone's going through, being curious and being there for them is going to help a lot more than knowing all those things. So if nothing else, try to be curious about their experience. So what is immigration? Why do people do it? Immigration is moving to a different country, and essentially it's any move. It's not only people moving for work or people moving for education. It's anyone moving somewhere for a few years and switching cultures and switching the context. And immigration is especially visible in Canada and in the United States because there are a lot of people who are migrants here. If you look at Canada, there's over 7.5 million of us, and about 22% of the society is first-generation immigrants, and about 18% is second generation. Whereas in the US, the percentages might be smaller, but the number of people is way higher. It's about 40 million people in the US who are first-generation immigrants. That's a lot of people, and that means you probably are encountering some of them day to day. And some of them might be your teammates, or they might just be people you meet in various situations. And it's not a bad thing to notice that they're slightly different when it comes to the culture or the way they communicate. It's perfectly natural to see that someone is an immigrant and maybe try to understand their experience. And we as North Americans, the new immigrants and the established immigrants and the few generations in immigrants are sharing that experience of trying to understand our cultures and interacting with each other on a daily basis. So there's definitely a lot of us here. And it's something that impacts a lot of people in the society, and that's why I think it's important. There is often a lot of conversations around why people migrate, and a lot of them focus on, the opportunities, the making more money, the having a better life. And yeah, fair, that's important, right? A lot of people migrate because of that. But try to remember that some people migrate because of safety. They are not safe in the country or the situation they're in. Maybe they're facing persecution. Maybe there are economical issues or climate change issues that they have to move away from. Maybe some of them are here for opportunities, not for themselves, but for their children or other family members. And some of them, like me, are just here because they're curious. There was really no reason why I moved to Canada other than my partner being here. And it was my choice that I made from a very comfortable place. I could have just stayed in Poland, and I think my life would be great too. So it's not always about moving to somewhere that's better. And also that better is not always defined simply by work or opportunities or making more money. There are various reasons why people move. So try not to assume you know why they did it. And it's hard. I I have a lot to say about it, so I'm going to try and be brief because we really want to focus on some solutions here and not just saying how hard it is to do it. But keep that in mind. It's switching cultures. It's going somewhere that you don't have an established relationship with a lot of people. You don't have a lot of work history. You know, in many ways that's freeing. But at the same time, it puts that much more work on you to just have the daily interactions that you're used to, that were maybe so much easier in the culture that you were coming from. And often you have to do it in a different language and with people who notice that you look differently or you speak differently, or there are so many things about you that they notice that wouldn't have been something you have to think about in your previous context. So it's hard. It's hard in different ways and different levels on anyone who's experiencing it. But nevertheless, don't assume that, oh, it's easier because this person is this and that, or it's harder for that person because of something else. Just try to see the person and not the system, and get curious about why it might be particularly hard or maybe easier for them. And just keep in mind it's still hard, no matter if it's easier or not. It's still a hard thing to do. The process is very stressful and transactional. You have to prove that you deserve to be in your new country. And in different countries, it's a different cost and a different process. But in general, countries want immigrants that are going to benefit them, the culture, the economy, in many ways. And this process is for us to prove that we deserve to be part of this new culture, and we're not going to be a burden for the new culture. One of the reasons you can be rejected in the immigration process is because you have medical issues and the country that is accepting you decides, oh, we don't want to bear that cost, that's too high, so we're not going to accept you in our country. And that's heartbreaking, right? Because you can't actually control that in many cases. So we're going through a process in which we have to document and prove our skills, our background, our abilities, why we want to do it, that we know we can support ourselves, that we deserve to be here. And that in itself is sometimes very dehumanizing, even though at the end of the day, it's humans who make those decisions for us. Secondly, it's very visibly impacting your well-being. Like, this is my heart rate. This is my heart rate for the first year of my immigration journey. First, when I was considering moving, and then I decided, and I had to tell it to my family, and I was preparing, and then I actually moved, and it was very hard at first, and it sort of got easier. I was like, oh, maybe I will never get a job and I'll just stay home forever. And it got stressful again because I'm not the kind of person who can live without a job. And it was visibly impacting my mood and my interactions with my partner. And just in general, it was physically hard on my body. It's not just something that's maybe stressful, mentally hard. That stress actually has impact on your actual health. So remember that any change can cause stress like this, and immigration is no different. The process of immigration is, initially you might be very excited and very happy, and you go and on that ride and you move somewhere, and then you start experiencing things you didn't expect, and then it gets harder, and then you sort of get annoyed and angry and frustrated at the same time. And it can go either way. You can either break through that and then find a way to be happy in your country and find a way to be thriving there. Or in some cases, it can just stay like that forever or get worse. And then some people decide to move back to where they came from. So you definitely want your team members to be on that first progression. You want to, even if they're frustrated, even if it's hard for them in the moment, you want to help them get to that happy place where they can thrive and support other team members and just be themselves at work and be productive. So even when you settle in, those challenges just keep coming, right? You have that blank slate at first, which is great because yay, freedom. I don't have any bad history here. I can just be myself. But in being yourself comes with a lot of cost of proving who you are, and then not understanding why people don't see it, or they see certain things about you that you don't think are true, and just constantly struggling with that. So that blank slate is kind of a double-edged sword. It's great, but it's also very hard to establish yourself in a new country. And then even when you're establishing yourself and you're learning those things, there are culture shocks coming. And in my experience, they're not ending. I still find things that are shocking for me in Canada. And I've kind of accepted by now that they're never going to end, and there's always going to be something. Even when I lived here and I read books and I've seen movies, even after a few years of being here, there are still things in Canada that shock me from time to time. And then you never really stop being homesick, and it can get more intense. So, you miss your family, you miss your friends, you miss things you like, but then you might start missing things you never thought you would like. Like I started missing folk culture, and I started buying folk Polish things that I would never buy living in Poland. But now they're in my house just because that brings me closer to my culture. But then even if I go back to my culture, if I visit my family, I'm an outsider. And that has been a shocking experience for me, because all those little changes that are accumulating in this process, you don't really see them day to day. And suddenly you go visit and a person in the store looks at you weird because you keep smiling at them and asking how are they doing, which is not something you do in Poland in a store. So there's some things you can do to work through that. Some things I've done that helped me, and I also know other immigrants that have went through that. First of all, you have to kind of embrace the change. And I'm not saying like you always have to be happy about it and you have to keep positive. There are going to be better days and worse days. But it's more about accepting that this is just going to be the state it's in. I don't know, maybe it ends after 20 years of being in a country. I haven't done that yet. But I would assume that for the time being, like those issues you're experiencing are just going to be your lived experience, and finding strategies to work around them or maybe work through them and embrace them are going to be much more impactful in a positive way than fighting against them and trying to change things. There are certain things you can't change about a culture. Like I cannot change the fact that the tax is not included in price here, no matter how much I miss that and how much it irritates me to do that mental math every time I pay for something. That's something I can't change, and I have to accept that. Secondly, try to build up your confidence. Like you've done something super hard. You have moved countries. You've moved cultures. You see things that other people don't see because they irritate you, but also because they're interesting and new. It's something that a lot of people around you haven't done. Like they've done similar things, definitely. They've challenged themselves, but maybe not always to that extent. You can prove you can learn things, because what's harder than moving countries, working in a new language and a new culture and struggling with that every day and having to learn how to communicate and how to do your job in the middle of all of that. On top of all that, you have to also be a professional that performs in the job. And just notice how much you're changing and that you have done a lot of hard things. One of them is figuring out the immigration system, which is absolutely awful, I think, in any country, but especially so in the US, as far as I know from my friends. So try to remember that you've done something amazing and you're great, and just build that confidence, because immigration is a great thing for your growth and you've done a lot. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Then to get that strength and get that confidence, try to find spaces for yourself. Spaces that have to do with your culture, like friends who speak your language, or food that tastes like food at home. Trying to find a space for your personal goals when you can work on something that has nothing to do with being an immigrant or being in this new culture or anything around growing that. Just growing your own interests and your own skills for yourself, and having that core you that's maybe neither of the cultures, so both of them at the same time. And also try to find spaces in the new culture that will allow you to explore and ask questions in a safe way, and also start understanding some of those tricky cultural differences that you are facing. But never forget to cultivate your quirks. Never forget those little things that, you know, maybe come from your culture or your family that make you you. Like not wearing shoes in the house is the thing that I always do. I talk a lot about air pressure because that's what Polish people do. Or I just do diminutives of any word. And if I don't have them in English, I'll switch to Polish because I just communicate in that way a lot. Those little quirks help you center yourself in like being you and what's you, and you get to choose which ones you keep and which ones you change and which ones you accept from the new culture. And it's for you to define your identity and for you to decide what you want to keep and what you want to change. Be ready to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. And I think it's important to learn how to recover from them more so than avoid making them. If you're just embarrassed and you said something silly, try to just, you know, make it quick and sweet. Just say, oh, that was not what I meant. That was silly. Haha, move on. They're embarrassing, they're uncomfortable, but they're going to happen a lot. Like I mispronounce things all the time. If it's something that you thought you understood, but you actually didn't, and it comes from a point of ignorance, which means you just don't know as much as you knew about something, just embrace that. Say, I don't know, ask people for help and learn it. That's going to help you grow much more than explaining, oh, you know, I don't know because I'm from this culture. And it's just, it makes that conversation harder. And then thirdly, there are situations in which maybe it's different in your culture than the culture you came to. When you wronged someone, there's this urge to explain why you did that and why you misunderstood. And I would just say, yeah, people know that. They know you're from a different culture, but also there is an impact that your actions had, and it's more important to address that than to focus on discussing the cultural differences. So, you know, try to make mistakes and iterate and not get hung up on them, because that will just maybe grow that frustration or keep you from embracing the new culture and the situation you're in. And lastly, you are empowered to set expectations for your teammates, and just do that clearly, like preferably as early as possible. Talk to them about the way you want to communicate, maybe some boundaries you have, especially ones that they might not expect, and just tell them this is what you expect, and you'll give them space to learn as they are giving you space to learn this new culture, and try to just make this relationship work over time and help them understand what you need. You can expect things from them too. It's not only about you adjusting to the new culture. And yes, they can expect things from you, and some of them are going to be people specific, not culture specific. So try to have that relationship defined early on and make sure that you're communicating clearly around those boundaries. So speaking of your teammates, if you grew up in a culture, it's the way of life of the group of people that you grew up with, right? It's very hard to see outside of that culture. And I mean, that's any culture. Like, it was very hard for me to see outside of the Polish culture. It's not about being from a particular country. It's more about we as humans grow up in cultures. So when you grow up in a culture, there are three main areas in which that culture is visible. There's the language, either a particular language or maybe an accent or maybe some specific grammar forms you're using. There's the social system in which you grow up and you kind of assume this is the default for solving these kinds of social issues. And then there are the customs and norms, which is, you know, expecting certain behaviors in specific contexts. So let me give you a few brief examples of how I experienced that as an immigrant. Language is often a very interesting point of communication for me with other people, because my accent is kind of nondescript and their instinct is to try to figure out where I'm from, which I think most of the time is a positive thing, but sometimes it kind of places me in some sort of hierarchy that they think of when they think of different countries and different cultures, especially so in Europe, because in Europe people have more prejudice about Polish people and how we are like specifically, less so in Canada and the US. And I wouldn't say that is a bad intention, but that has a measurable impact on how I communicate with people and how they see me. So when you notice yourself doing that, just be aware of it. I think is the most important thing. Even if you can't fix noticing things. Like, it's not a thing to fix. You just need to embrace the fact that you've noticed them, and then try not to necessarily act on them, right? Remind yourself that you make grammar mistakes too, and that English is a very hard language and it's very different in different countries. Just be ready to answer questions, to ask questions if you misunderstood someone. Be open to the fact that language is a frame that you have that for someone else is a frame that they have to grow into, and it's always going to have some problems. And just being open to questions and providing resources for people to learn. Like my team provides it for me in the group chat where I ask questions all the time, is going to help them grow. The other thing I mentioned is the social system. For me, the biggest example of that is the work environment. In Poland, what's considered work environment is much more specific. It's a full-time employment contract. It has a certain assumption about vacation days, overtime, and whatnot, and it's by law. So it's not employer specific. It is very much defined in law. And that was a very different frame for when I came to Canada and I first encountered the different contracts we have around work here. And that's for any system. Like, any system at the very beginning might seem very hard because you don't really know the rules of the system and you need to gather a lot of information. So to help your team members work through that, just try to figure out steps there that you're not noticing anymore because you've been doing them for a while. Like, you know how work contract works because you've been working, you know how to get to a medical center and get help because you've done that. But someone who's new doesn't necessarily know it, and it's not the way you do it in your culture is not necessarily obvious. So try to help them build that ladder to get started on that task. And then I know the social norms in Canada, and I also know the social norms in Poland. And the fact that I know them is sometimes not helpful because they might be conflicting. There are different ways of reacting to things in Poland than there are in Canada. So as simple as how are you? In Canada, we kind of expect an answer that's, nondescript and is kind of a greeting. But in Poland, that implies you're actually curious how someone feels and you're in for an answer. So remember that whenever you ask me a question like that, like I might know the proper Canadian form or American form, but I'm also coming from a culture that has a different approach to it. And sometimes I'll just mix them up or forget, or one of them will take over. And even if I logically know something, I've lived way more through the Polish experience of that. And that's my instinct when reacting to things. So, keeping in mind that if someone crosses the norm that hurt someone else, that's the most important thing that's happening in the moment. So try to, not use that as an excuse for a behavior that's just unacceptable. But if it hasn't crossed the line, just try to be curious, like what's happening there? Is it cultural difference? Is it a language issue? Did they intend to do something else? Did they blurt out something weird? A lot of things can happen. And sometimes it's just wiring in my brain works differently on a given day. And I say something stupid and I'm like, oh, right. That was not the Canadian thing to say. And then I tell everyone on my team, I'm having a Polish day. I'm sorry, I can't think in Canadian today. And it's fine. Those days happen. So what are some other things you can try and do? I think the first thing is to find a curiosity lens. So try to find an experience that's similar to what your team members are going through, like moving cities, changing schools, switching jobs, and just remember how you felt in that situation and use it as a way to understand their experience by at the same time not belittling it and saying, oh, I know how that works. I moved schools, or that's not what we're looking for here. Just try to use it as a starting point for a conversation and say, oh, I don't actually understand. Like I had a similar experience, but I think yours is different. But if we find some ways they are similar, going to help me empathize more and understand what you're going through. Secondly, take a holistic view. I know you want to help your teammates. Just remember that there's balancing, and everyone is balancing learning and safety. Yes, they want to learn and they want to do great in this new culture and support the team, but there's only so much learning they can take at the same time. And if you make this balance unstable, it can just have a negative impact on the life. So remember that probably also facing other things outside of work or maybe at work with other teammates, and there's only so much they can take. So try to make this relationship work long-term and work through small changes rather than piling everything up, because then this balance just topples over and it makes it way more stressful. Try to spark genuine curiosity. So I don't mean like go to your teammates, have a list of questions and ask them like, oh, I want to learn this and that thing about your country. Because while you might be genuinely curious, that might not come off as such to them. Try to find the moments in which they are opening up their culture and their ideas to you. Like they're cooking something and you're learning a new dish from them, or they're celebrating a holiday, or they used an emoji and you don't understand what they meant. Try to pick those moments and understand what it was about, because sometimes it's not about the culture at all. Like I don't only cook Polish food, I cook a lot of different food. So it's not necessarily about me being Polish or being an immigrant. So try to just get curious and ask them questions and understand where they're coming from and what they're up to. And again, build that over time. Don't pile it up, because that might make for a very uncomfortable conversation for everyone involved. Know yourself in the situation. Know what you are comfortable with and which hard topics you're ready to talk about. There are topics that come up on my team that not everyone wants to chat about, that I usually ask when I needed someone to help me with figuring out medical help. I asked if there's anyone who wants to do that and is comfortable with doing that, because that's a topic not everyone wants to talk about. So try to figure out what you're comfortable with and communicate that. And also if you change your mind, that's also fine. Just communicate that you changed your mind. And remember about the context you have this conversation in. So if it's a hard topic for you, it might be for your teammates as well. So maybe a better way of talking about it is on a video call rather than in a group chat with everyone there. And also remember that something that might be hard for you in the other culture might be very easy to, like, it's very easy for me to talk about money, which is not necessarily a Polish thing, it's more of a me thing. And I find it very hard sometimes to remember that maybe that's not a topic everyone wants to talk about. You also need to be ready to make mistakes. And I would say the mistakes you might be making in this relationship are the reverse of the mistakes I was talking about when speaking about an immigrant experience. So you're always going to have some prejudice, and sometimes you're going to act on it, and that's fine. Like, you're going to make those mistakes. You can't escape them, but try to recognize when that happens. When you're generalizing, like you're saying, all Polish people do this thing because this one Polish person I know does the thing. Or you're assuming, oh, this person knew what they were doing and it did it on purpose, when they actually just did something because they didn't understand what the custom is and they were lost and they were trying to figure out the situation. Or when they don't understand you and don't do something when you thought they would do it, not because they didn't mean to understand you, didn't want to help you, but because they just misunderstood what you meant. Maybe you were very vague. Maybe you said something as a question and you actually meant it as something they need to do, which happens to me a lot. Sometimes I need to ask, is that a suggestion? Or do you actually want me to do that? Because if it's not something I have to do, I might do something else, because I make decisions on how I work. So try to be clear and just stop yourself before reacting and try to find a lens through it. Makes sense that they had the right intentions and then there was some sort of misalignment in communication. And lastly, learn from other sources and other stories. As I said at the beginning of this talk, I am a very specific person with a very specific experience. And this talk might not click for you. And there might be something else that clicks for you, like work on your communication skills in general, because communicating with any team member is about your communication skills. Listening to other immigrants, looking at data, talking to experts. There's so many ways that you can engage with this topic. So try to engage in different ways. If this talk worked for you or it didn't work for you, just try to figure out other ways you can get informed and keep yourself informed. And just remember to spark curiosity wherever you're doing to make it better. And I think by now you see that this talk was more about supporting your team members, any team members, new team members you maybe didn't have the best relationship with, someone that you had a conflict with, just anyone on your team. And the immigration lens here is just one of many lenses that can happen in a work context. And it's not necessarily worse or better or special, it's just different. So giving you some context of that, I think was helpful. But also remember that any of the strategies and any of those ideas work just well for your team, for communicating and supporting your team members. So for me, the best thing that helped me was just learning about communication skills and learning about supporting other people, regardless of the context in which I was doing that. So you don't only have to use those strategies to support your immigrant team members or understand them, just support your team members with a lot of curiosity and being there for them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alicja, for that. That was a great talk. And I really liked a lot of these points, and interesting. I think even some of them can still apply to new jobs and communities as other things. They can have a lot of their own cultures when you move into them as well, and you may not know them, but I definitely love the specific call out to immigrants and them. Alicja, are you there? And are you unmuted? I think I need to ask you to unmute.
I'm here. Hi.
Here we go. Hello. I was kind of curious, what do you think might be the one single most, or the single best thing that a teammate could do to support an immigrant teammate?
One single thing. Okay. I think the best thing that they can do is just step back sometimes and give the space. Because oftentimes I would start talking about something and I process it in a different way, or I speak about it in a different way. And people would get impatient and try to help me by interrupting me and going a different direction. And I think the best thing they could do in that moment is step back and wait for me to call them and say, hey, like, now I'm ready for you to help me. Instead of them assuming I need help because they might just not know what I need. So there is a lot in wanting to support your team members, but just remembering that you need to understand them first before you help them. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how did you personally decide what kind of the Polish cultures you wanted to keep versus what you wanted to adapt to, like the Canadian cultures?
I think I'm often making those decisions as I go, because there are certain things that a few years back I would never change. And I would say, this is the core of being Polish. And if you are telling me to change that, that is just rude, right? This is my culture. One of the examples was pronouns in English. Polish does not have a non-gender specific pronoun. The language does not support that. And for a long time, I would say, it's very hard for me to do that in English because my native language does not have it. And no matter how hard I try, my brain just thinks in gender binary. And over time, by having more and more friends who do that, and by understanding how to use it, and by just getting support in building that new language, I was able to start using the they, them pronouns, or any pronouns that someone has. And that was a decision I made based on immersing myself in the culture and going through that hard time of just changing how my brain thinks about English and things in English. So a lot of those decisions I make based on, how much happiness is going to bring me and people around me. Is it going to bring me closer to people that I want to be close with? And not necessarily is it going to make my life easier, because some of those things are surprisingly hard, but mostly like, can I get the support system to get there? And do I have a safe space to make mistakes around it? And by now, I don't really think there is anything I would say, I'm forever going to do it the Canadian way, or I'm forever going to do it the Polish way. I think they're just going to keep changing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone had mentioned in the Heartifacts Live channel that they sometimes worry about feeling, some people might see them as a threat to local jobs, a threat. Did you face any of this when you went over to Canada? And do you have any suggestions for those that might?
Yeah, I have heard go back to your country a few times. I would say more so in the UK than in Canada, just because of the culture difference to my country. Like in Canada, it's not as pronounced. I usually just, if I'm in the space for a conversation with that person, if they're not aggressive, because if they're aggressive, I'm just walking away, right? There is no point in talking to an aggressive person. But if it was a coworker or, you know, someone who feels comfortable speaking their mind, I would start being curious, like, why do you think that? Like, why do you think I should go back to my country? Why do you think I'm a threat to the job market here? Like, if my employer could find someone who's not an immigrant, I'm pretty sure they would hire a non-immigrant. It's way easier to hire Canadians than it is to hire Polish people in Canada. Why would they go through the trouble of getting me a job and pay me the same, because I'm not being paid less because I'm an immigrant, if they could just hire a Canadian person and never worry about the cultural differences and any immigration issues? Like, what makes you think I am doing this? I'm taking away someone's job. And I think that's a question of like, can you engage with this person or not? Do you feel safe to engage with them? Is this situation not threatening to you? And do you want to do that, right? Because sometimes it's just best to ignore them, because if you engage with them, they go off into more and more intense ideas. So I would make it more of a judgment call. But if you care about a relationship with this person, or maybe people who have a relationship with this person, try understanding what they are thinking about there.
Yeah. How somebody had said they were wondering how they could stand up for their coworkers when their bosses aren't treating them very well because their English isn't very good. So is there anything that a coworker could do, or is there anything a coworker did for you that was really helpful in some way?
I remember one situation. It was less about my English, it was about someone else's English. I was working in the UK and someone had a very thick Irish accent. And at that point, my English was pretty new and I couldn't understand them at all. They would speak to me and I would try and I just couldn't understand them. It was so hard. And I talked to one of my coworkers and I said, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to work with this person on a project, but I just cannot understand them for the life of me. I'm trying and I'm not getting there. So two things they did is they found a different reason for me to not be on a project with that person, because that would make it impossible for us to work. And then they actually sat down with me and started helping me understand Irish accents. We would watch videos and they would tell me what the videos were about, and we would talk, and slowly but surely I built up this understanding of the accent. So that was something I experienced. And then supporting my team members here in Canada, I've never experienced that in Canada, but I've seen other team members maybe not knowing what they're supposed to do when someone's English is not up to par in their opinion. And I was just very firm. I said, you do not correct someone if it does not change the meaning. You do not correct documentation, internal documentation, because somebody, forgot a V or an A, because PRs that are there just to correct someone's English when they're a software engineer are not great, because you're focusing on something else than the job is about, right? Like, you don't want to spend the time correcting their English if it does not, at the end of the day, matter. You're not there to do that. And if they ask you to help them with their English, only then you can do it. But they have been hired for this job. They're able to communicate. They're able to do their job. Unless it's interfering with what they're doing, you do not get to correct them. And even if you do, treat it as correcting anything else. Just remember, language skills are a skill as anything else, right? So they can grow and improve them, and everyone makes mistakes.
I muted myself. Yeah, definitely. And I think we're about out of time for Q&A. I saw a couple more questions pop up at the last moment, but you can definitely keep asking those in our Heartifacts live channel. Alicia will be there hopefully for at least the rest of today, maybe the rest of the days. So thank you all for joining us. That about wraps up day one here at Heartifacts. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you, Anjuan. Thank you, Aneika. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you, Alicia, for the great job that all of you have provided tonight. Remember that our Slack channels are open 24/7, so you can keep chatting with the others about the talks you've seen, about the breakouts you've been in, other things you've been thinking about, things like that. So please join us tomorrow. We'll be on at 8 Eastern or 5 Pacific. We'll have 3 more speakers, Tori, Jameson, and Valerie. We'll have 2 more breakouts and another fun activity. The Zoom, YouTube, and Twitch links should all be the same, but just in case, make sure you check them out in the attendee portal. If you're a ticketed Heartifacts attendee, we're about to head into the breakout sessions in a few minutes and we're done. So head to breakout A if you want to chat more about keeping it human, or breakout B if you want to talk about supporting immigrant team members. And for everyone, see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. Have a great, wonderful evening, and remember to take care of yourself.